Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is William Malone and I am a retired employee of 27 years and now I am in real estate and I'm sharing my knowledge with you guys today. So, what are we talking about today? So, what I want to talk about today is how deals are being done today. There's not a lot of deals that are penciling out today. I personally think the worst thing you can do is stop looking for deals. Somebody somewhere is motivated to sell their property at a decent price or to work out some good terms in order to sell the property. One thing I do know for sure is that there is a lot of money sitting on the sidelines right now that are waiting for interest rates to drop. Now, we all know that the administration, Trump gets his own person in there next year in May. And most likely the interest rates are going to drop around that time. But what's going to happen with the price in real estate when that happens? So relatively, when prices when interest rates go down, prices go up. Okay, so when Trump goes in there and he drops these prices next year, there's going to be a lot of people coming off the sideline to buy property. So a lot of deals for a little while they may pencil out, but it also may turn into a bidding war. When they come back with all this money and people are competing for these properties all over again. So I think the best thing that people can do today, right now, is educate themselves on how to buy property other than doing it the traditional financing way to make deals pencil out. And one of the best ways to do it is doing creative financing, which is also called seller financing. They're both the same thing. I think the most common term is probably seller financing, though. And the seller and the buyers need to educate themselves on creative financing. I think there's a lot of buyers out here today that are scared of seller financing because they don't understand it. And then there's a lot of buyers out here who don't understand it either. But I think sellers are hearing it more often than not now. Because the numbers just aren't working out for the buyer. And and I don't blame the buyer. One thing I do know for sure as a buyer is that you want to buy on cash flow. If the property is not cash flowing, what's the point of buying it? I mean, and this, I think this really goes to figure out, how much money you really have. If you have billions of dollars, obviously you can buy a property that's not cash flowing, just to hide your money for tax benefits, depreciation, and stuff like that. The real reason people get into real estate, to hide their money and for tax benefits. So if you have that type of money, kudos to you, but if you don't, and you're just starting off, like I've been in real estate for 6 years now, I'm not looking for properties that I can hide my money in. I'm actually looking for properties that cash flow. And, you know, I'm not too sure that I would ever buy, just to hide money. I would want my property to cash flow at all times, because taxes go up, insurance goes up, utilities go up, and you're paying these things out of pocket each year if your property is not cash flowing. So the property is really a liability. If it's not cash flowing and putting money in your pocket, it's not an asset, it's a liability. So, I don't know why anybody would want a property like that. But at the end of the day, sellers and buyers need to get more educated on the seller financing part of deals. And so seller carry first, that's one. Where the loan is the number one priority. It's just like the seller, he's just acting as the bank. That's all it is. Instead of going to the bank and getting the loan, you go to the seller. And most of the time, the seller is going to own this property outright. There's no loans on this property. He already owns it. And it's really easy to do this type of deal with him, especially if you're just working with the seller. If it's just not on the MLS and you don't have an agent between you guys, this can really be done really well with just you and the seller. But it can be done with an agent also. It just takes a little more time. But the seller just acts as the bank. You know, um, if he has to foreclose on the loan, he can. Just like a bank would. So if you falter on the loan, the seller has every right to foreclose on the loan. And I know you guys act like, why would sellers do something like this? But they do it for tax benefits. They do it for the higher sale price, a faster sale, steady income. That's a big one. To me, this is when real estate becomes 100% passive income because real estate is not passive income. When you own property, you still have work to do to the property. Even if you have a property manager, you have to keep up with your property manager. But when you're doing seller financing and the seller gives all the responsibility of the property to the buyer, this is passive income, 100% passive income. Uh, you guys have control over the terms, whether it's 10 years, a 5-year deal, how much interest you're going to pay to the seller during this time. All the numbers are negotiable. The down payment for the seller is non refundable. So if it's $1 million property, you give them 10% down, which is $100,000. That's non-refundable. So if the seller does have to foreclose on the deal, he gets to keep that. And any work that you've done to the property during that time as a buyer, any work you've done to the property, like if you've gone in there, you put paint on the building, or if you have to fix an AC unit or a leak, you lose out on that money. So you want to do right by this loan. And another reason that sellers do this is because they don't have their paperwork in order. When you go to the bank, banks like to see records. They like to see leases. They like to see T12s. They also like to see rent rolls. And if the seller doesn't have all this stuff in order, it's going to be harder for the buyer to get the loan. So it's another reason why they do stuff like this. But you definitely want to educate yourself with seller financing. This is just one option of seller financing, seller carry first. But this is the way things are going right now. And I think that, is this education, if you're going to be in real estate and be an investor in real estate, you want this type of education anyway, as a buyer or a seller. Obviously, I think the list for the seller is a little bit longer when it comes to advantages, but the buyer has a lot of advantages in there too. Less down payment, easier qualification, faster closing, flexible terms. These are big deals, for the buyer also. So it's in both the buyer and the seller's favor when it comes to seller financing. And I think that's why they call it creative financing also, is because you can get as creative as you want. You guys put your heads together and you guys come out for whatever works for the both of you. You want to make sure the deal is good for the both of you, but you get as creative as you want with this. And the most important thing is that people understand how to make deals pencil out in other ways of just going to the bank and doing the traditional financing. The seller, they can demand that higher sale price, which is what they're looking for today anyway. Especially with seller financing, the numbers will still be able to work out. So sellers, jump on board, get on this, because this is the way things are going today. This is where we're at today in the times, and who knows, next year things may change. It may go back to doing traditional financing where things pencil out, or it may take a year or two. These are waters that I've never had to maneuver in before. I've only been in real estate for about 6 or 7 years now, and this is just what I'm seeing. And I'm just sharing with you guys what I see, and I have no idea what the future is going to be or how it's going to turn out, but I do know what's working today and what's not working today. And traditional financing today is not working out. The sellers are demanding way too much money for their properties today. So educate yourself with creative financing, or the seller financing part of real estate. And even if you're not going to use it, I think it's really important that you educate yourself with it, because even if you don't use it today, you might use it tomorrow, a year from now, or 5 years from now, or whatever. So it's just good to have in your back pocket in case you need to pull it out sometime. So I hope this video helped you guys out. Please leave a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you at the next one.